Hi everyone, my name is Ridhima, and today I'm going to be talking to you about something I'm extremely passionate about, being curious and how me being curious changed my life. So I'm going to start by telling you a story. I'm sitting in a Starbucks studying for a science exam when I had a pretty funny interaction with someone. I'm typing away at my computer, and as I look up, it's a barista, a face that I'm familiar with, and this guy asks me the most random question ever. He says, "I'm sorry to barge or intrude, but I was just curious. Where are you from?" A little taken aback, I respond by saying, "Oh, me? I'm from India." He then proceeds to do something a little bit funny. He puts his hands together in a namaste gesture while asking me, "Are you a Muslim?" So that was an interesting interaction, but the interesting thing about that interaction was it wasn't coming from a place of racism or hatred. It was coming from a place of genuine curiosity. I know that because the next 5 to 6 minutes that I had a conversation with this guy, he was asking me questions about the differences between the South Asian countries and religions and cultures, and I, someone who's passionate about my culture, was more than happy to share that with him. It was such a small and seemingly insignificant interaction. However, that interaction has taught me to think about something bigger, to become something bigger, to be just a little bit more nosy and a little bit more curious. I went home and I told a family member about this, and she replied, "How nosy? That guy should learn to mind his own business." However, I didn't see it like that. I myself am quite a nosy individual. I love asking questions. I love learning about the world around me, and it just doesn't make sense to me that I shouldn't ask questions. How can you expect me and my peers to live in this big, crazy world without asking questions? See, psychologists call it epistemic curiosity. It's a concept in psychology centered around the basic human instinct to eliminate uncertainty. When we're born, we are these confused little babies. We don't know anything about the world. We have to be curious because we don't know anything about us. I like to say we're born with a flame of curiosity, and our responsibility as humans throughout our lifetime is to nurture this flame, to add fuel to this fire, to always ask questions. Did you know that the average child between the ages of 4 and 8 asks a whopping 107 questions per hour? But did you also know that as we grow up, that number decreases to about 4 questions per hour? And I think to that, we all have to ask ourselves why. Why do we stop being curious after a certain point in our lives? I realized that it happens because as we grow older, whether that's teenagers when we graduate high school, young adults when we graduate university, when we get a master's degree or a PhD, we all realize, we feel at some point we no longer have to be curious because we've learned so much. And that's the problem with humans. We believe that we don't need to know more because we believe we know everything. And as you can see, it leads to a bit of a circle of self-sabotage. But today I'm going to be explaining you 3 ways being curious changed my life and how you can incorporate that into yours as well. So, the first way, curiosity through connections. We are surrounded by people all of the time. There's 7 billion people in the world, 4 billion people in Asia, 7 million people in Hong Kong, 1,200 students and staff alone in West Island School. And yet, a lot of us don't know how to be curious. A lot of us don't know who to ask. I live with my parents. I've lived with them pretty much my whole life, and I'm assuming a lot of you do as well. And the thing about that is you would think you would know a lot about your parents because you've lived with them your whole life. That's the paradox of curiosity. I found myself being curious about my parents' lives even when I should know most about them. I find myself often asking my parents questions, like to my mom, "What were you like when you were younger?" To my dad, "What would you have done had you not chose engineering as a career path?" And upon asking them these questions, I developed a deeper connection with my parents. And I did this even beyond my parental circle. One of my best friends is a 50-year-old woman, and we get along not because she lectures me all the time telling me what to do and what not to do. We get along because we're interested in each other's stories. We're curious about each other's lives. Believe it or not, your parents had lives before they gave birth to you, and I found that very interesting whenever I speak to my best friend, who is also a 50-year-old woman. Despite our large age gap, we get along just as I would with any of my other friends. But Ridhima, if it's so easy to ask questions, then why don't more people do it? Well, I have an answer to that. See, it can be attributed to traits beyond just the way we feel, beyond our decisions. The onus isn't all on our decisions and decision making. The onus can also be contributed to societal stigma, environmental places, the educational environment you've grown up in, gender norms. See, the thing about curiosity, for women and girls especially, is that we have been silent for so long that when we finally start speaking up, it's often considered boisterous, nosy, loud. And when a guy does it, it's considered extroverted and funny. And to all the women and girls in the audience, I want to let you all know that being curious, speaking your mind, and asking questions doesn't make you any less capable, any less independent. And see, another thing I realized was that children my age avoid talking at all, regardless of their gender, because we are so focused on fitting in, being cool, that we believe there's no point in asking questions. We don't have to because we know everything. Now, in order to combat that, I want you all to start doing curiosity over conformity, which is my second point. Don't conform yourself to the norms that society sets up behind being nosy, asking too many questions. For me personally, I know that if I ever have a question in class, I'm more than happy to raise my hand right in the sky and ask it, because I refuse to let my natural epistemic curiosity get extinguished by the gender norms, societal norms, cultural norms that society has set. Now on to number 3. I call this one Unlearning Your Learnings. See, I don't like maths. I've never been that good at it as a subject. I'm terrible at it, is what I used to tell myself for pretty much my entire life until I got into year 10. In fact, I was so bad at it because I made myself believe that I was not good at maths. But the thing about curiosity is more than just learning about a new subject. Curiosity can be unlearning something that you've known your whole life. For me, that was maths. I'm terrible at maths. I've known that my whole life. But when I decided to be curious about the subject, when I decided to approach my maths classroom with oh, I have maths today, I wonder what I'm going to learn today, instead of oh, I have maths today, I'm really not looking forward to it kind of mindset, I changed my ability to do mathematics. I went from getting 4s and 5s out of 9 in the subject to consistently scoring 6s, 7s, and 8s because I decided to be curious. The thing about our brains in environments like that is there's a part of our brain called the amygdala, and our amygdala tends to get overstimulated when we get nervous. The key about curiosity is that it reverses your amygdala's stimulus response. You become less nervous when you start asking questions because you get answers. That's what overthinking is. Overthinking is when you constantly ask your brain questions that you're never going to get an answer to. And to prevent my overstimulated amygdala from getting in the way of me excelling in mathematics, I decided to ask a question. One question led to another question led to 5, and 5 questions led to getting 7 8s in mathematics. That's me being confused in math. Now, the third one, or the fourth point that I'm going to introduce you, the fourth and final point, is called finding the majestic in the mundane. See, I'm sitting in my economics class one day and I'm bored. I get bored in econ quite often, to say the least. However, I changed that boredom by being curious, and this is how. Did you know that in Zimbabwe, to buy 1 loaf of bread, you have to carry bags and bags worth of coins and money because that's just how bad the inflation is over there? Well, see, I didn't know that. And when I heard this interesting fact in a not so interesting class, my brain began to wonder. Dopamine began to become released within my brain. I was intrigued. That's very interesting. So imagine my surprise when I found myself going home, researching about this inflation crisis in Zimbabwe, while simultaneously learning about the science behind inflation. But I hate economics. Why am I researching about it outside of school? See, a study done in the University of Davis, California in 2014 helps me understand why I had that reaction. What they did in the school was basically they took a bunch of trivia questions and put them next to faces, random faces. The people the researchers asked the students to look at the trivia questions and then look at the faces. The students that were interested in the trivia questions were more likely to remember the faces that were next to them. And this shows how our brains, even when faced with irrelevant information, if we're curious about it, we can remember it, which was what happened to me in my econ class. And there's a scientific point behind that too. There's a part of our brain called the midbrain. The midbrain releases dopamine. And when we see something we're intrigued by, dopamine is released. When we are released with dopamine, our brain gets active. And when our brain are active, our brain absorbs information faster, regardless of the relevance that information may have to you. So in my class, I wasn't interested in the inflation, the science behind it, but I have a fond interest of global politics. So upon hearing about what was happening in Zimbabwe, I thought, wow, that's quite interesting. When I went home and Googled it, I also simultaneously found myself researching about inflation, which resulted in me getting good grades in my economics tests because I was curious. I was nosy, to say the least. Now, for my final points, closing remarks, I'd just like to tell you all today, regardless of your age, your academics, or whatever, we are all humans. And as humans, our body's natural reaction to the supernatural world is asking questions. If you stop asking questions, if you stop being nosy, if you stop being curious, you're not going to move ahead in life. And the next time somebody tells you that curiosity kills the cat, tell them that cats have 9 lives, and that gives you 8 more where you can still be nosy and be curious. Thank you.